Life felt like a dream. I had a job I enjoyed, good friends around me, and most importantly, a man I thought was the love of my life. Daniel, my fiancé, was everything I'd ever wished for. Kind, funny, supportive, and always making me feel like I was the only woman in the world. When he proposed to me under the soft glow of fairy lights at my favorite cafe, I thought my heart would burst from happiness. My family was overjoyed too, or so I believed. My mother cried tears of happiness. My father hugged Daniel like a son, and my younger sister, Claire, clapped the loudest that night. She smiled at me, told me how lucky I was, and even helped me pick out the perfect engagement dress. To me, she was not just my sister. She was my best friend. The weeks that followed were filled with planning. Daniel and I visited venues, tasted cakes, and flipped through magazines to choose decorations. Claire tagged along most of the time, giving her opinion with excitement. She always seemed so enthusiastic, sometimes even more than me. "Don't worry, sis. I'll make sure your big day is perfect," she said more than once. I trusted her completely. Looking back, maybe there were tiny signs I should have noticed. The way Claire lingered in conversations with Daniel, or how her eyes sparkled when he spoke. But at that time, I thought nothing of it. I was too blinded by love, too busy dreaming about walking down the aisle in my white gown, Daniel waiting at the altar with that warm smile of his. Everything felt safe, beautiful, and certain. I had no idea that the perfect beginning I was living would soon turn into the darkest betrayal I could ever imagine. At first, everything between Daniel, Claire, and me seemed normal. We still laughed together, shared meals, and made plans for the wedding. But slowly, I started to notice little things that made me uncomfortable. Whenever Daniel came over, Claire always seemed to be around. She was a little too close, laugh a little too loudly at his jokes, and find reasons to touch his arm or shoulder. Once, when I walked into the living room, I found him sitting on the couch, heads bent close together, whispering and smiling. They jumped apart as soon as they saw me, acting like nothing was wrong. I brushed it off, telling myself, they're just getting along. Isn't that what I wanted? Still, the moments kept adding up. If I was late getting home from work, Claire would already be there with Daniel, sipping coffee and talking. When we discussed wedding plans, she often answered questions for me, as though she were the bride. "Oh, Daniel doesn't like roses. He prefers lilies," she once said, and I remember feeling a strange sting in my chest. How did she know that when I didn't? I tried to ignore the growing unease. Claire was my sister, my blood. She wouldn't hurt me, and Daniel had promised to love me forever. But sometimes when I caught them exchanging glances, it felt like there was a secret between them, something I wasn't part of. One night, while scrolling through my phone, I thought about asking Daniel directly if something was going on, but I didn't want to sound insecure or jealous. I convinced myself I was imagining things. After all, we were planning a wedding. Soon we'd be married, and everything would fall into place. What I didn't know was that these small betrayals were only the beginning of something far more painful. The uneasy feelings kept growing inside me, even though I tried hard to ignore them. But one evening, the truth came crashing down in a way I never expected. I had come home early from work, hoping to surprise Daniel with dinner. As I walked into the apartment, I noticed something strange. His phone was buzzing on the table. Usually, Daniel never left his phone lying around. Out of curiosity, I picked it up, thinking it might be important. That's when I saw Claire's name flashing across the screen. My heart pounded. I told myself it was probably innocent. Maybe she wanted to ask about the wedding. But when the phone buzzed again, a message preview popped up. "I can't wait to see you tonight. Don't tell her." My hands shook. I unlocked the phone and scrolled through their conversation. What I found shattered me completely. Dozens of messages filled the screen. Sweet words, secret plans, and even pictures they had sent each other. Some messages dated back months, even before Daniel proposed to me. It was clear this wasn't a small mistake. It was a full-blown affair. Tears blurred my vision as I dropped the phone onto the couch. My chest felt heavy, like someone had placed a stone on my heart. My sister, my own blood, the person I trusted most in the world, had been sneaking around with the man I was supposed to marry. I wanted to scream, but instead I sat in silence, my mind racing. Memories of their stolen glances, their secretive smiles, suddenly made sense. I hadn't been paranoid. I had been blind. When Daniel came home later that night, he looked surprised to see me. I tried to act normal, but I couldn't stop staring at him, wondering how many lies he had told me while holding my hand and promising forever. That night, I cried myself to sleep. My perfect beginning was gone, replaced by the cruel truth. The two people I loved most had betrayed me in the worst way possible. The next day, I couldn't keep the truth inside any longer. I sat Daniel down in the living room, my hands trembling as I held his phone in front of him. "Do you want to explain this?" I asked, my voice cracking. For a moment, his face went pale. Then, instead of denying it, he sighed heavily and looked down. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way," he said quietly. My heart dropped. He wasn't even going to lie. He was admitting everything. "How could you?" I whispered. "With my own sister?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "It just happened, Claire, and I connected in a way I didn't expect. I still care about you, but I don't think we should get married." His words hit me like knives. After all the promises, the dreams we had built together, he was throwing all away so easily. I wanted to scream at him, to demand how he could betray me so deeply, but the pain in my chest left me too weak to speak. When Claire found out, I knew. She didn't even look guilty. Instead, she smirked and said, "Daniel and I are in love. You'll find someone else." Her arrogance stung worse than the betrayal itself. Within a week, the engagement was officially broken. I returned the ring, packed away the wedding dress I had chosen so carefully, and deleted the Pinterest boards filled with dream decorations. Everything I had looked forward to was gone in an instant. I felt humiliated, not only by losing my fiancé, but by losing him to my own sister. Friends and relatives tried to comfort me, but their pity-filled looks only reminded me of my broken heart. What hurt most wasn't just losing Daniel. It was realizing that my sister, the person I thought would stand beside me forever, had chosen to stab me in the back instead. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, another blow came crashing down. Only a few months after my broken engagement, my parents called a family dinner. I assumed it was just a regular gathering, maybe a chance to ease a tension that had been hanging in the air since everything fell apart. But the moment I walked in and saw Claire and Daniel sitting side by side, holding hands, my stomach tightened. Halfway through dinner, Claire stood up with a wide grin. "I have some exciting news," she announced proudly. "Daniel and I are getting married." The room fell silent. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. My mother gasped, while my father stared at them in disbelief. Daniel looked awkward, but he still forced a smile as Claire flashed a ring at everyone. It was the same ring he had once given me. My heart shattered all over again. My parents exchanged glances. My father shook his head, muttering something under his breath. My mother, however, clapped her hands nervously and tried to act happy. "Well, congratulations," she said, though her voice lacked warmth. Claire turned to me, her eyes gleaming with victory. "Of course you'll come to the wedding. You're my sister. It wouldn't be right without you there." Her words were sharp, almost mocking, like salt rubbed into a wound. I could barely breathe. Attend their wedding? Watch my sister marry the man who had once promised me forever? The thought made me sick. Later that night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the invitation card that Claire had already slipped into my bag. It was as if she had planned the entire scene to humiliate me. Tears filled my eyes, but behind the sadness, a spark of determination lit up. Maybe I couldn't stop their wedding. Maybe I couldn't undo the betrayal. But one thing was certain. If I did go, it wouldn't be on their terms. For days, I stared at the wedding invitation sitting on my desk. Every time I looked at it, a storm of emotions rose inside me. Anger, sadness, humiliation, and even a strange curiosity. Part of me wanted to rip it into pieces and throw it away. Another part whispered that maybe I needed to go, if only to face them one last time. Friends gave me different advice. "Don't go," one of them said firmly. "Why torture yourself?" Watching them marry will break you all over again. Another friend, however, told me, go. Show them you're not afraid. Don't let them think they destroyed you. Even my parents had opinions. My father wanted me to stay away, saying it was disrespectful of Claire to even invite me. My mother, always trying to keep peace, gently suggested, maybe go will help you find closure. At night, I lay awake, replaying everything in my mind. The proposal Daniel had made to me, the way Claire had clapped the loudest that evening, and the smug smile she wore when she announced her wedding. Rage burned in my chest, but beneath it was a deep ache. I had lost not just my fiancé, but also my sister, and nothing could repair that. Finally, after endless days of torment, I made my choice. I would go, not to bless their marriage, not to play the role of a supportive sister, but to stand tall. I wanted them to see that they hadn't broken me completely. I wanted Claire to know that her victory wasn't as sweet as she thought. The decision gave me a strange sense of strength. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control again. And deep down, I couldn't shake the thought that something about that wedding would change everything. The morning of the wedding, my hands shook as I got dressed. I chose a simple but elegant dress, nothing too flashy, but enough to remind everyone that I still carried dignity and grace. As I looked in the mirror, I whispered to myself, "You are stronger than this. You can face them." When I arrived at the venue, the decorations nearly took my breath away. Roses lined the walkway, candles flickered on every table, and a grand arch stood ready for the bride and groom. It should have been beautiful, but for me, it felt like walking into a nightmare that once belonged to me. Guests whispered as I walked in. Some looked shocked, others looked uncomfortable. I could feel eyes on me, but I held my head high and kept moving. Then I saw them. Claire in her white gown, radiant and glowing, Daniel standing tall beside her in a suit. They looked like the picture-perfect couple. At first, Claire smiled brightly at the crowd, but the moment her eyes landed on me, her face froze. The color drained from her cheeks, and her confident smile vanished instantly. Daniel's jaw tightened as he shifted uncomfortably. The room seemed to hold its breath. I gave him a polite nod and quietly took a seat near the back. I didn't cause a scene, but my very presence had done enough. Claire kept glancing in my direction, her expression flickering between anger and fear. The ceremony began, but the tension in the room was heavy. I noticed the guests exchanging glances, whispering among themselves, as though everyone could sense that something was wrong. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt like I had some power again. I didn't need to shout or cry. The look on Claire's face told me that just showing up had shaken her world. I sat there silently, waiting. Deep down, I knew the real moment hadn't come yet. The ceremony dragged on, but I barely heard the words of the officiant. My eyes stayed fixed on Claire and Daniel, watching them shift uneasily under the weight of my presence. Claire's hands trembled as she held her bouquet, and Daniel avoided looking in my direction altogether. When the moment came for the vows, Claire began to speak. Her voice was sweet at first, but it cracked when she glanced at me. I could tell she was struggling to keep her smile steady. The guests noticed too. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I hadn't planned to say anything, but when the officiant asked if anyone had a reason why the couple should not be married, the silence was too heavy. My heart raced as I stood up. Every head turned toward me. "I do," I said firmly. The room gasped. Claire's eyes widened in shock, and Daniel's face turned pale. My voice shook, but I pressed on. Before Daniel proposed to Claire, he proposed to me. We were engaged, planning a wedding, until I found out the two of them were having an affair behind my back. Murmurs filled the hall. Some guests covered their mouths in disbelief. Others glared at Claire and Daniel with judgment. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my purse. It was a copy of the text messages I had saved from Daniel's phone. "This is proof," I said, holding it up, "proof that this wedding is built on lies." Claire dropped her bouquet, her face pale and lips trembling. Daniel tried to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, I felt the weight lift from my chest. I wasn't the one being humiliated anymore. The truth was out, and the shame now belonged to them. The hall erupted in chaos the moment I finished speaking. Guests rose from their chairs. whispering loudly, some demanding answers. Claire's bridesmaids looked horrified, while Daniel's groomsmen stared at him with disgust. The once perfect wedding scene had turned into a storm of shame. Claire rushed toward me, her face twisted with anger. "How dare you come here and ruin my day?" she shouted, her voice breaking. "Your day!" I shot back, my voice steady. "This should have been our day, Claire. But you stole it from me. You stole him from me." Gasps echoed through the room. My father stood up, his voice booming. "Enough! Claire, you betrayed your own sister. And you, Daniel, how could you do this to our family?" His disappointment filled the room like a heavy weight. Daniel finally tried to speak, his voice shaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." But his excuses fell flat. No one wanted to hear them. Some guests began leaving, shaking their heads in disgust. Others stayed, whispering about how shameful it was for his sister to steal her sibling's fiancé. The fairy tale wedding had turned into a public scandal. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, but they weren't from guilt. They were from humiliation. Her perfect moment had collapsed in front of everyone. She glared at me as if I had ruined everything, when in reality, all I had done was reveal the truth. My mother sat quietly in the corner, tears streaming down her face. She looked broken, torn between her two daughters. My father's jaw was tight, his disappointment written all over his face. Daniel lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. Claire tried to grab his arm, but he pulled away slightly, doubt flickering across his face. For the first time, she realized she might lose even the man she betrayed me for. I stood there in silence, calm and steady, as their world crumbled around them. For once, I wasn't a broken one. They were. After the chaos of that day, I walked out of the wedding hall with my head held high. For the first time in months, I felt free. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I had faced them, spoken the truth, and taken back my strength. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my life. At first, the silence fell heavy. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives, some apologizing, others still in shock over what had happened. I ignored most of them. I didn't owe anyone explanations anymore. Claire never reached out, and I didn't expect her to. I heard through whispers that her relationship with Daniel had begun to crack after the disastrous wedding. Trust built on lies could never last, and deep down, I knew they were already paying the price for their choices. Instead of dwelling on them, I focused on myself. I poured my energy into my work, spent time with friends who truly cared, and reconnected with hobbies I had abandoned. Slowly, I began to feel alive again. One evening, as I watched the sunset from my balcony, I realized something important. Losing Daniel and Claire was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a stronger one. They had betrayed me, yes, but they had also freed me from a life built on deception. I didn't need revenge or bitterness. My dignity and peace of mind were enough. With every passing day, the pain grew lighter, replaced by hope for a future that was mine to create. And so, I moved forward, not as the woman who was betrayed, but as the woman who survived, healed, and chose herself above all else.